Episode 9 of Running Rampant on BronxNet in association with Fordham Athletics and presented by United Healthcare. Emmanuel Berbari with you already in the second month of 2021. And the big news this week in Fordham Athletics, a change head coaching wise with men's basketball. Jeff Neubauer leaves the program after 5.5 seasons. And who better to discuss it than Director of Athletics Ed Cole? We'll talk to him in just a moment. Then, an important topic of the month, Black History Month. President of Fordham University, Father McShane, kicks off the celebration. He reflects on the impact of Dr. Martin Luther King from his personal encounters, the significance he holds this coming month. We transition back to the basketball programs to wrap up the show on the tail end. Men's basketball interim head coach Mike DePauli joins our very own Andrew Bogish. Learned a little bit more about Mike, his 11th year on the staff, ascending to the head coaching role this season. On the women's basketball front, episode 2 of Reminiscing with the Rams, senior guard Donna Thatke with alum Kathleen Reedy. But the story of the week remains men's basketball and the upcoming national head coaching search. We join Director of Athletics Ed Cole for answers. Welcome to another AD update just outside the Rose Hill Gym in front of the men's basketball offices. Emmanuel Berbari joined by Fordham Director of Athletics Ed Cole. Ed, good to be with you.
Great to be with you as always, Manny.
Ed, a big week, of course. The men's basketball team starts a new chapter, moving on from head coach Jeff Neubauer. Interim head coach Mike DePauli takes over. What was this week like for the student athletes?
Yeah, a difficult week for our men's basketball student athletes. As you can imagine, a difficult, obviously, decision from our standpoint, from my standpoint, in terms of making a change in coach and doing it during the season. As you know, we wish the absolute best to Coach Neubauer, complete professional, complete class act the entire way. And I know the success situation speaks for itself, but it's a situation where we thought it was in the best well-being of our student athletes in terms of the culture and environment and support mechanisms around them. And, you know, we're very sensitive to the student athlete in this process. We wanted to make sure Coach Neubauer had the proper opportunity to address the team, say goodbye to the team, spend some time with the players on his own, in his own fashion and style. He's earned that in terms of his time and tenure here. The ability to speak to his staff and address them. So they all heard the news from Coach before me speaking with any of them and addressing them. And I know that doesn't make it easier, but I'm really confident and excited for Mike DePauli. I know a lot of folks know him from his 11 years here, but he has that strong communication skills, the personality. He's recruited many of these student athletes close to their families and parents. You know, I think he's the perfect leader to help support our student athletes and our best players the rest of the way. And as you know, on top of COVID and on top of scheduling changes and the crazy challenging year we've had, it's important to have that leadership and to support them appropriately. And as I've been saying to some other folks too, as difficult of a year this is for our men's basketball team and for basketball in general right now, with the eligibility changes, the NCAA rules, it's almost a little bit of a kind of extra year of playing. It's like a free basketball season. So I remind our student athletes that it's not lost time. It's not time that they're never going to get back. It's almost the opportunity to have, you know, an extra season, free basketball, and they should make the most of that and be positive about that and keep them uplifted. And I think they're doing that. As you know, they continue to play hard.
Ed, you referenced we surge into the future now when it comes to the men's basketball program. The national search will begin essentially immediately. What phase is that in right now?
I appreciate you asking about that too, Manny, even in terms of this week and this transition. I never want to be in a position to be having conversations about replacing somebody that's still on your staff or setting up committee meetings and talking about the status of someone's job who's still in place. I don't work that way. My integrity is not built that way. It's not the organization and culture I want to have in our athletics department. And that's part of the conversation with Coach Neubauer. We would never want to have those conversations behind his back and the whispers of the inevitable timeline. So that's another positive of the situation. So we'll establish an internal search committee within the university folks and some board of trustee members. And we'll look, obviously, and start the process of looking through names and vetting and research process of the next steps. And, you know, we have a little bit longer of a runway now to get started a little bit earlier based on where we are heading into February and next week. But we want to be in our best position possible come the end of the season to make a hire as quick as possible.
And as we're taping right now, semester 2 underway, students moving back into campus at Rose Hill. Men's soccer schedule is out, volleyball practicing in the gym as we speak. Are there any new protocols? What's the mapped out plan for semester number 2 at Rose Hill this year?
Yeah, so this weekend will be the final move-in weekend before we start classes on Monday, which you're a part of. And we've had 3 different move-in weekends for different student athletes and groups. Volleyball, as you commented, they came back a little earlier because of their season. Track and field, swimming came back a little earlier. Football came back a little early. Soccer, and then the rest of our student athletes come back this weekend. And you know, in all of our conversations about adversity and overcoming challenges and adapting to the crazy times, our student athletes, I guess, are a little bit more comfortable in terms of that quarantine period, depending on where they're coming from, which state. The negative test, they're going to be tested frequently throughout the spring, like our basketball program in terms of A-10 or Patriot League, or obviously our water polo competition. And our sports medicine group has done a great job of establishing that testing protocol. We're still doing the daily check-ins, temperature, vital check, and in conjunction with University Health Services. Dr. Lynch, Dr. Goldwasser are on every phone call with us, so I'm very confident and proud of our team and the support mechanisms we have in place for this semester, and just excited that they're all going to be back competing.
Ed, appreciate your time. Best of luck with the new semester.
I appreciate you too, Manny. Thank you.
Plenty of work to come for the men's basketball program. We thank Ed Cole for joining us as always. That work will start this month, where the focus is both on and off the court for all of the Fordham teams. Black History Month holds some extra weight for President of Fordham University, Father McShane. Father joins the program for the first time for some personal reflections. Right off the top, Dr. Martin Luther King.
More than 40 years ago, when I was a graduate student at the University of Chicago, I had the great good fortune to be mentored by Martin E. Marty, a scholar who was considered to be the Dean of American Religious Historians. Although that description may lead you to think that he was a stuffy guy, as many in my profession can be, I assure you that he was anything but stuffy or removed from the rough and tumble of American religious history or the rough and tumble of American religious life. In fact, he was always in the thick of things. He made it a point to rub shoulders with the women and men who were not writing about history, but who were making history. His experiences, which he shared freely with his students, made his classes exciting and downright engrossing. His story about an experience he had with and of Dr. Martin Luther King was one that is fresh in my memory even now, all these years later. After Dr. King had been the headliner at a conference that he had organized, Mr. Marty and his wife Elsa invited Dr. King and his wife Coretta Scott King to dinner to celebrate the success of the program. When they arrived at the restaurant, the 4 of them were shown to a banquette at the back of the restaurant. Mr. Marty and his wife scooted into the inner seats against the wall and began to settle in. Dr. and Mrs. King, however, just stood there. After a few awkward moments, Dr. King simply said that he and his wife would prefer the seats against the wall. Mr. and Mrs. Marty slid out of their seats immediately, and Dr. and Mrs. King took their places. After they had all settled in, Mr. Marty asked Dr. King why he wanted the seat against the wall, since Marty had thought that he would prefer a seat that would be less confining. Dr. King sighed and said simply, "I believe that I will be assassinated. I just want to be able to look the man who is carrying it out in the eyes as he pulls the trigger." Now, as you might imagine, all of us gasped when Mr. Marty shared this story with us. And why? Because the first time in our lives, we began to understand just how costly Dr. King's prophetic ministry was, and how reconciled he was to embracing the cross that he had taken up in assuming that ministry. And so, my friends, I have always seen Dr. King in the light of that story. Prior to that, I had seen him as a great man, to be sure. I had admired him for his constancy. I had stood in awe of the power of his preaching. After hearing that story, however, I also saw him as a prophet who knew full well the cost and burden of the role he played, not for himself, but for his community and for the whole nation. A prophet, not a role that one would choose for oneself, not a cross that is easy to bear. But it was clear that Dr. King accepted that role with grace with strong and serene conviction, with deep love, and with even deeper faith. His biography makes it clear that it was, as I suggested, a heavy and costly ministry that he took on. He was considered a troublemaker in his time. He was jailed by local police for leading nonviolent protests. He was relentlessly investigated by the FBI. And ultimately, as he suspected, he was assassinated by a racist who could not abide the prophetic message that he delivered to a nation that all too frequently was unwilling to accept it. In spite of the treatment he endured in his lifetime, however, Dr. King's reputation and his importance in American life has only grown in the last 53 years, thanks to the hard work of scholars, civil rights advocates, and journalists. This is a man that we should continue all our days and all our history as a nation to celebrate and to thank God for.
Awesome to hear from Father McShane. We thank him for joining the show and look forward to plenty of similar reflections to come this Black History Month. As referenced earlier, though, a head coaching search coming for the Fordham men's basketball program. In the meantime, someone who's been with Fordham's entire coaching career, risen through the ranks, leads the charge the remainder of this season. It's Mike DePauli. He joined Andrew Bogish earlier in the week ahead of his head coaching debut. Let's get to know Mike a little bit more.
So, Mike, obviously not the situation that you wanted to come about here, but you're a head coach right now. What is your first thought or two going through your mind now that you're in charge?
Yeah. So great question. And it's really been consistent since I found out earlier today. It's 100% about the players. Trying to pour everything we can into this group right now, and making sure they're okay. You know, obviously it's such a strange year to begin with COVID. And so they have a lot going on to begin with, but just making sure that they're okay right now. They're doing okay. They're positive. They feel good about the direction we're going in. And one of the things that we spoke with them about was, during our practice today, right before practice, was let's just try and have a good 2.5 hours of practice and prep before Duquesne. And Andrew, they were terrific. Like, we couldn't ask for much more of them. They were locked in. They were dialed in. So, hopefully that bodes well in terms of where we're headed as we move forward.
Mike, it seems like on any level, when there's a coaching change, teams can go in one of two directions. Sometimes they get a bump and they take off and they play well. Sometimes, the bad gets worse. How do you make sure that you guys go in the right direction right now?
Yeah. So, I think it starts in kind of what I just said in terms of everybody feeling valued, everybody feeling important about where we're headed right now. And for them understanding the plan of where we're going and how we're going to get there. And I said this to them. I said, the answers are in the room. We need some guys who are already playing well to play better. We have some other guys who maybe aren't playing to their capabilities to play a little bit better than where they are. So yeah, and the big thing is, again, just becoming like this. Like, we got to stay together right now, which is, again, has been the emphasis of the day. Like, like I told you, we asked them to give us 2.5 hours on the court. They did. And then after that, all we've been doing, the staff, the whole afternoon, is spending time with players. I've spoke to, everybody's parents, but 3 of them. And just, again, not only do we want them to be comfortable, we want their parents to understand the situation, where we're at, and how we plan on moving forward.
Obviously, this game against Duquesne coming the day after this change, it's unlikely to see it now. But once you have a chance to kind of settle in here, will the Rams look much different with you in charge the rest of the season?
Yeah. So the answer is, defensively, the plan is to look a lot like we did against Rhode Island, and hopefully like we did against Duquesne the first time. Like, that's who we are defensively. And we're after being an elite defensive team. Right now, I think we're a good to very good, depending on the day, defensive team. We want to be elite. So defensively, the answer is no. We will continue to be who we are defensively. Offensively, we will make some tweaks and adjustments. That will be a gradual thing. Again, we want these guys to feel comfortable right now. And it's not about flipping anything over within 24 hours. It's about just trying to get this much better every single day. And that's what I spoke to the group about. Like, I can't promise them that we're going to win tomorrow night, or I can't promise we're going to win in our next game, which we don't really know when we're playing next with, GW and UMass with COVID situations. But let's just concentrate on what we have control over right now. because there's a lot that we don't have control over. So let's focus on what we do have control over, and that's literally getting this much better every single time we come together.
And obviously a season-long issue on the offensive end for you guys. How do you continue to just tell them that the ball's eventually going to go in? How do you work on the mental side of things to make them keep shooting?
Yeah. So just staying with it, staying in the gym, which we have guys who live in the gym. And that's how I know it's going to happen. Like, we have guys who are in the gym all the time. And again, you just keep pounding the rock. Eventually the rock's going to crack. So we have guys who live in the gym. We do want the guys to feel confident in who they are as shooters. So again, making them feel good about themselves as players when the ball's not going through the hoop, because you have to stay with it. Larry Bird, one of the best shooters of all time, said, if I miss my first 10, I'm shooting the 11th one the exact same. And that's part of it. When you're a scorer and you're a shooter, you have to have a short-term memory. So just encouraging them to stay with it, and eventually they'll see the fruits of their labor.
Mike, when was the last time you were in charge of a game?
It's a great question. There's things I'll be learning as we go here. I will say this, very fortunate, Dennis Felton and Anthony Evans. I can't, we met before we met with the team, and as we were trying to process this, just extremely fortunate to have them on staff, two former head coaches with a lot of experience. So we'll be leaning on them a lot. They have great character. They have great humility. So as much as it's about me being the interim head coach, any success we have, we're going to do together. And that goes for as a staff and as a team.
Mike, I guess the last question, just, what do you guys, and I know it's a day-to-day, game-to-game thing, but what do you hope to just accomplish here over the last 2 months, whatever it is, of the season?
Yeah. So we want these guys to have a positive experience. And if that's winning a lot of games, or if that's whatever that is, we want them to have a positive experience, especially right now during the COVID time. Mental health is so important. We're going to pour ourselves into these guys in every way we can, from being on the court with them to being in the film room to making sure they're okay off the court, making sure things are good at home. But yeah, just making sure they have a positive experience. And that is celebrating the incremental steps in getting better. It's not just going to happen overnight, but every small success we have, we are going to celebrate.
And we hope you continue to join our virtual game day experience. WFUV's Andrew Posadas and Dylan Balsamo get you geared up as we all remain socially distant this season. Another virtual experience, reminiscing with the Rams. It's episode 2 of this women's basketball program, connecting current players with alumni. This week, senior guard Idona Thatke with Kathleen Reedy, one of the prominent alums of the women's basketball program. Idona, take it away.
Hello, everyone. We are here celebrating the 50th anniversary of Fordham Women's Basketball. My name is Idona Thatke, and I'm a senior on the team, majoring in economics, and we have Kathleen here. So, Kathleen, take us a little bit into your time at Fordham. What was a favorite memory you've had there?
Oh, gosh, there's so many. I mean, it was a long time ago, back in the 80s.
Not long.
Oh, very long. You weren't even alive. So yes, very long. And God, there's so many memories. I think, we just had a lot of fun as teammates. We weren't the best team. I think the best our team ever did was we were 500, I think, my junior and senior year. But despite our record, we always just made really, really great memories and had lots and lots of fun as a team. Both on the court and off the court. I still have lasting friendships with many of my teammates. So I would say just the camaraderie is probably my most favorite memories.
For sure. I definitely feel the same way. You just build those long lasting friendships. I know I'll still talk to these people even after I graduate. Obviously you take there's a lot of things you learn on and off the court being a part of a basketball team. What was your biggest takeaway from, being part of the Fordham women's team?
I think just being a student athlete, it was discipline, time management. You're getting up. We had 1 year, my junior year, where we tried 5 a.m. practices, which was a bad experiment for a lot of players on the team. I wasn't so much of a morning person then. I am now. Now I would love that. But back then it was a struggle, but just kind of learning, my roommates are all sleeping and they're out at night and like doing whatever. And we're on just these seemed like easier schedules. And we had to be disciplined with our time, as you know, and, our classes and studying and practice. And it's a job, being a student athlete is a job. So just, that's the biggest takeaway, because you never really have to adjust when you go into the working world, because you're used to having to manage your time and, being responsible to others and, having to be diligent with everything.
Right, definitely. That makes sense. The early morning practices, they kill you in the moment, but, you get used to it. So obviously, you work for the NBA. Things are so different right now. Like, what are the changes? Like, were you a part of the bubble at all, or, working from home? Like, can you tell us about your experience a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I've been at the NBA. It'll be 28 years this month. And it was obviously when the pandemic struck, we were trying to figure out what model would our season take. And, when the bubble conversation started, it was strange and scary. And, even though it sounded like it would be safe, it was still a scary proposition to imagine going anywhere at that time. We'd all been locked in our houses for so long. But I did go to the NBA bubble. There was kind of a bubble, and then there was like an outer bubble. So the bubble was for the players and for, people that needed to be courtside and like team personnel. And then there was the outer bubble, which is what I was in, which was for like the TV personnel, like broadcasting, like ESPN and TNT, and myself, because I'm in the broadcasting department. So what that meant was I wasn't on the campus with the players, but I was at a quarantined hotel. So we were also quarantined, but we just were separate from the players. And I was there for 41 days. And my responsibilities were sitting in a truck with ESPN and TNT and monitoring. We did an unprecedented amount of access. We put microphones on players and coaches for almost every game that aired. And my responsibility was essentially screening that access, listening to the microphones in every game, and making sure the networks didn't broadcast anything that we wouldn't want to be heard.
Did you find it difficult, like quarantining there, being away from your friends and family? Like, how was that? It
was strange, but then oddly safe. Like, you felt like you were in a cocoon. It was weird because the rest of the world was kind of living in this COVID environment where it's scary to go out and go to the grocery store, but everybody was getting tested all the time. Everyone I interacted with was getting tested constantly. So you knew everyone around you was safe. So it was oddly like, it almost felt good to be there. And yeah, you felt safe. And then from there, I left the NBA bubble, came home for 2 weeks, and then I went back to the WNBA for the finals. So again, I wasn't in the bubble. I stayed outside the bubble there because I got there so late, but I was there to see Seattle win the title.
Right. And from a broadcasting perspective, obviously there's no fans and everything's different. Like, how hard was that adjusting to it?
I mean, I think the bigger adjustment was for the players, being used to hearing the crowd and reacting to the crowd and having that pressure to perform for the crowd and the home court advantage. But, watching the games on television, like, obviously you miss it, but I really feel like both leagues did a really great job with the telecast. I think our network partners did a really awesome job of making the shows look so great with access and with interviews and with other things that I don't want to say it wasn't missed, because of course we missed the fans, but I do think that what we were able to supplement with kind of in this environment made it an absolutely awesome product.
Right. I mean, it was a success, obviously. Like, I mean, you guys killed it and it looked great, which was nice. We still got to experience and watch basketball. So obviously I'm graduating in May. What's a piece of advice you would give me as a graduating senior, just for the real world, finishing this year off?
I mean, I think the most important thing, you have to, I don't want to say love what you do, but you should love what you do, but you have to like what you do and the people you're working with. You have to go into something that you're passionate about. I always wanted to work in television, and obviously I always loved basketball. The fact that I ended up at the NBA is kind of just like the convergence of both things that I always cared about. So for me, it worked out. But I think, a lot of people found their way to the NBA where I work, and none of them had a basketball background or a TV background. They came from all different walks of life. But I think you just have to, you'll know when it feels right and when it's the right place for you. But I think you just have to work hard to find something that's a good fit for you and where you're comfortable and, ready to shine.
Right. And that's awesome that you get to stay around basketball. Was that something you kind of made it a point, like, playing college athletics? Did you want to stay around basketball, or was it kind of like, doesn't really matter which sport I'm broadcasting for?
Yeah, I think I just kind of lucked out that it was basketball. I don't think I ever intended to stay directly in basketball. I think sports was a priority. I somehow wanted to be in sports television on the production side. And then the NBA position just kind of happened. But yeah, I consider myself lucky to be still in sports and in basketball.
That's awesome. That's all the questions we have for today. Thanks for hopping on this call, Kathleen.
Absolutely.
And go Rams.
Go Rams.
Support.
Although we were the Lady Rams, which is very kind of
it's different.
Yeah, no, it's not really appropriate. But yes, we were the Lady Rams.
You still playing basketball these days at all? Maybe like a little pickup league?
No, I actually did. I ended up getting hurt after college. Like, I played all the time with some women that I work with. We had a really good squad. And when you get hurt and you're not in college anymore and no one will help you get better, it kind of sucks. So I kind of had to just move away from hoops, and I exercise, but the hoops I got to stay away from.
Gotcha.
But I miss it. And I wish you well.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. We'll get through this, though.
You will.
Thanks for joining another edition of Running Rampant right here on BronxNet in association with Fordham Athletics, and presented, as always, by United Healthcare. Big thanks to our guest today, Director of Athletics Ed Cole, Fordham University President Father McShane, Fordham Interim Head Coach with men's basketball Mike DePauli, Fordham Women's Basketball Senior Guard Idona Thatke, and alum Kathleen Reedy. Big thanks to our producer, David Bernard Santana, and everyone else who made this show possible. Episode 10 comes your way in 2 weeks. Until then, be well and be safe. Emmanuel Berbari with you.